Thomas Mata, and I would like to welcome you to this panel named Multi-Species Service Crop, why you should incorporate diversity. Sorry. Our speaker is Steve Groff. He is connected from Pennsylvania, United States. So through the presentation that we were about to see, you will be able to send questions in the right part of your screen. You have a panel to ask questions for Steve. We will do that questions at the end of the panel. You can do it obviously in Spanish, and it will be translated to Steve in English. I will try to introduce Steve and then leave the talk open to him to get to know what he can say about the multi-crop service crop. Sorry. So Steve Groff and his family farms 215 acres of cash grain crops, cover crops for seed, pumpkins, hard squash, and heirloom tomatoes in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. That was for the past 25 years. And he had developed the tillage radish, a cover crop known and used it around the world. Steve is the founder of Cover Crop Coaching, which educates farmers and farm advisors about effective cover crop use. He does regenerative agriculture consulting and is the author of the recently released book, The Future Proof Farm, Changing Mindsets in a Changing World. Well, that's a good title for the book. Steve, I will ask you a copy then.
All right.
Good. So, Steve, thanks for joining us. It will be a pleasure to listen to you. So, I leave the microphone open for you, and we meet at the end with some questions.
Okay, muchas gracias. It's good to be with you all today. And I've been looking forward to this time to be able to share some of the things that I have learned over the years, and specifically as we're talking about the use of more than one species of a cover crop, the benefits of diversification. And so I'm really looking forward to sharing with you today. Now, I was in Argentina and Uruguay last November, and I was, when I arrived at the airport, Buenos Aires, my host was Sandro and Maria Teresa. And when we went out to take my luggage to get in the truck, I noticed that he had a shovel in his truck. And I thought, that's excellent. This is a good start. These people understand soil health. They understand that it's more than just the biomass on the top. You have to look below the soil. So we got off to a good start, and I really enjoyed my time in Argentina and Uruguay. And I learned to drink mate. So I hope you're enjoying your mate today as you listen to my talk. So a really good time there. Now let's talk a little bit about some background information that you need to know. And sometimes the way we think is the biggest barrier to advancement, to moving forward, to getting better. So as my book that was mentioned there, Changing Mindsets in a Changing World, we have to change sometimes the way we think. And one of them is you can't buy soil health. You can't go out and buy a bag or a container of soil health. Soil health has to be made. It's you, the farmer, or those of you who are consultants that advise farmers. That's how soil health is made. Now, you can buy products, you can buy cover crop seeds, you can do no tillage. All of that is a part of being a better farmer in the context of soil health. So it's all about you and your management. And the word management, you're going to see that a couple times from me today, because this is important in the context of understanding how to make multiple species work. So again, a background. I don't care where you are in the world. I don't care where you live in Argentina or other countries. Your soil, the soil that's on your farm, in your geography, was formed by multiple species and had living roots in the soil at all times. And this is a very important concept to understand, because what we're trying to do is mimic nature, to be like nature. How can we do that and then benefit in the way we grow our food? There are some insights, there are some clues into understanding this fundamental truth of trying to mimic nature. Nature is complex. Nature is diverse. Just look at the prairie, look at the woods, and you will see multiple species. You will see living roots year round. You will see the soil is covered year round. How can we grow our food? How can we grow our crops trying to mimic nature? That's really what this current soil health movement, the regenerative agriculture, whatever you want to call it, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to look at nature, not eliminate the products that we use, but maybe use less of them, because I think we've overused a lot of the inputs in our modern agriculture. So I am suggesting we reconsider the amount of inputs that we use, but look to nature to give us some clues. Now I want to show you some examples at my farm. This is how my field looked 30 years ago. I got this picture out, and you can see how there's little stones on top of the soil. That's because I tilled my soil, I disked it, I harrowed it, a lot of tillage. And I showed this picture to my son. My son is 23 years old. And he said, "That's not our soil." I said, "Yes, it was our soil. It's not anymore, but that's the way it used to look like." And so through management, through no-till, through the use of cover crops and multiple species of cover crops, crop diversity, we now have a better looking soil. You can see in this video, this is very close to where that picture was taken 30 years later. Now we have like 2 inches of pure soil on top. It's not been disturbed now for 38 years. 38 años. I'll try to lose a little of my Spanish. I don't know too much, but a long time. No-till, cover crops, mixed species, diversity. This is the result. How? The management, the way I manage my soil. That is the difference. So now, this is a great picture of how my fields typically look. We had a cover crop here, a mixed species of hairy vetch, triticale, and there was a couple other things in there. We rolled it down with a roller crimper, and then we no-till planted maize, corn. And this was for corn silage. We cut the corn silage off, and it came back, and you can see the new cover crop growing out of the old cover crop residue. And we grew the cash crop in between. This is an ideal system that I use. I can't do this every time, every field, every year, but this is the goal I have. You see, soil health is not a black and white issue. It's all about the direction you're going. And I don't really care too much where you're at today, but I do care about the direction you're headed. That's the most important thing for me, because we each have certain dynamics or certain barriers. Sometimes it's just in the head. Well, we can fix that. You just have to change your mind and be a little more open-minded, get educated. And sometimes it's tradition. Maybe you're the first person in the neighborhood to start using cover crops. I don't know what your challenges are. What are you moving in the right direction to soil health? So what changes can we expect? One of the biggest changes is the organic matter. Most all soils in the world that have been farmed for 100 years or more have gone down in organic matter. We all know that organic matter is good. How do you increase organic matter? Less tillage, no tillage, cover crops, something living in the soil, diversity. Those are the things that help organic matter. That's going to help us in increasing this valuable resource. How does that happen? It's management. The way we manage our farm, the way we manage our field. So to me, this is an important concept you need to understand before we start fine tuning some of the specifics on how we do cover crops. So here's a picture of my farm. On the left side, you can see 38 years ago when I started, I had some cash crops, one cover crop. Now, here 38 years later, I have many species, many cash crops, many cover crops. Your farm is going to look different. But the point is, how much can you diversify it? How many cover crops can you use? How many cash crops can you use? It's not about a contest, though. It's not to see who can grow the most cover crops, but it is about diversity. And I'm going to give you a challenge at the end here that hopefully you will increase the amount of diversity on your farm. Now, another thing that's important to remember is, do you understand how to manage your soils on your farm in the way they were designed to function? This is a very loaded sentence. Every word means something in this sentence. I'm going to repeat. Do you know how to manage your soils in the way they were designed to function? Do you know how your soils were designed to function? Do you understand that? See, when we buy a tractor, it comes with an owner's manual, something that helps you understand when to change the oil, what to do if you have a problem. In the same way, we need to think about how is our soil designed to function. One of the things that was new to me when I came to Argentina was how the water level, the water table has been rising over the last 20 years. And the reason is because there wasn't as much grass growing in the fields year round as there used to be, because you're just growing corn and just growing soybeans. So the water table is rising. So in La Pampas of Argentina, the soil is designed to function to have something living year round. That's where cover crops come in. And that's why we want to have the diversity too, so we can manage our soil in a way it's designed to function. You see, where I live in Pennsylvania, we have hills, and my soil can wash away in the rainstorm. So I do the exact same thing you would do in Argentina. I grow cover crops, but I do them for a different reason, because my soils, I need to have them covered so they don't erode when we have the rain storms. So it's understanding what you need to do for each geographical area. So just think about a few things. How is your soil designed to function? Well, I know, and I was very impressed how much no-till I saw in Argentina and Uruguay. But I'm saying no-till is not enough. No-till is a great first step, and you have done a good job at that. I really was impressed how much no-till there was, so good job. But it's not enough. And I will say then, using cover crops is the next best thing to do. But using one species of cover crop, it's an improvement. But using multiple species will take you to the next level of soil health. And it's all because of diversity. There's something magical happens with diversity. And it's just the way our soils were designed to function. Look at nature. So once we understand this concept and know how to manage it, then we can start reducing our inputs, like fertilizer and like pesticides. Now, I'm not advocating eliminating them. They are only tools. We only use as much fertilizer as we need, or as many pesticides as we need. They're tools that we can use. The technology is improving. They're getting better. You could say they're getting safer. So that's good. But also, as a farmer, I'm a farmer, most of you are farmers, if we can save some money by managing our fields, by managing our soils in the way they were designed to function, then we will be a more profitable farmer. And that's always something we have to work with. Farming is not a lucrative business. You don't get rich farming usually, unless at the end of your life you sell the land and it's worth a lot of money. But in the context of cash flow from year to year, we have to make enough money to pay our expenses. So this is the end result after we understand how our soil is designed to function in the context of maximizing our ability to produce. So we need to work with nature. And this is the fundamental reason why I'm promoting multiple species of cover crops, because it is a natural principle. You see, all around the world, farmers are the same in a couple things. We have, in the last, I'm going to say 50 or 60 years, we've been taught to control nature. We've been taught to control it with tools. And our mindset is, what am I going to kill today? What do I need to kill today? Is it an insect? Is it a disease? What do I need to kill? As soon as there's a problem, I need to buy something to kill something. And I'm not saying that's wrong, but we've used that too much of a mindset. I want to suggest, how can you get more life in your operation? And I think that's the title of your conference here. Siempre Vivo, Siempre Verde. How can you get more life into your operation? And I really like that caption you have for the title of your conference here. How can I mimic nature? How can I be like nature? How can I nurture it to help it along? How can I farm in that way is the question we need to answer. So here's an example of working with nature. This is earthworms, where they're obviously put there for a reason. They help to open up the soil. So if we don't disturb them, they're happier. They can thrive. But earthworms need food to eat, and they're just part of the chain of life in the soil. So we want to provide food for everybody that lives in the soil. So by having cover crops, by having plants growing in the soil year round, then the earthworms can even do better. And all the microbes and the things we can't see with our eyes, everything can do better, and it'll actually work for you if you know how to manage that. So another thing, again, mindset, treat your cover crops like your cash crops. And what I mean by that is we spend a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of management to get a good cash crop, good maize or good soya, whatever. Same as cover crops. You need to be thinking the same way. If you have this thinking, you will be a better farmer. You will maximize the cost of cover crops. I hear all the time, and I've asked this question myself, do cover crops pay? Are they economically viable? Can I pay for the cost of the seed? Can I pay for the cost of establishment? The answer is yes, if you manage correctly. The profit is in management. In cash cropping, the profit is in management. If you want to pay for your cover crop seeds, is how you manage them. That's why we're here today having this talk, so you understand how to be a better cover crop farmer. And that's why you need to go to field days, and you need to continue to learn. I like to say, stay curious, keep learning, because there's a lot in management with cover crops, just like we do with our cash crops. So let's talk a little bit here about multi-species cover crops. So I have my multi-species cover crop math. 1 + 1 = 3. Why is that correct here? Because of synergy. when you have two species that are growing together, they help each other. Now, I'm not going to get overly technical today. I'm not a scientist. I'm a farmer, but I know that when I plant two crops together, they do better. A simple explanation is hairy vetch and triticale. The hairy vetch provides nitrogen for the triticale. The triticale provides a place where the hairy vetch can climb up and grow. That makes the hairy vetch even more prolific in its growth. That's what I mean, 1 + 1 = 3, because of the synergistic effect. And this is a fundamental principle why multiple species work. And so I wanted to just share that. Now, you may ask the question, where do I start? Or I've been doing this for a couple years, and how can I get better at it? My first question that you need to answer actually is, what are you trying to accomplish? What is your goal with a multi-species cover crop? And it can be various things. There's a lot of things out there that can be. I'm going to list a couple of them here. On the top, we'll start. Maybe you want to make nitrogen because you're going to have corn as your next crop. So you want to have your mixed species to have more legumes in them. You might want to have hairy vetch, a crimson clover, Persian clover, and you still might want to do a little bit of a triticale as well, but you'll probably do more of that. If you want to hold the nitrogen there so it doesn't go into the water to leach or run off, you might want to plant some more grasses or some brassicas like the radish to help to keep the nitrogen there. So what are you trying to accomplish? If you want to increase organic matter, if that's an objective, you want to do more grasses. Grasses help increase organic matter quicker. Also, you might want to try to attract beneficial insects. So sometimes there's some flowering cover crops that put the flowers out that attract beneficial insects. And another popular one is buckwheat. You plant that over the summer. That helps unlock phosphorus. If you're low in phosphorus, adding buckwheat to your multi-species will help make more phosphorus available. And no matter what you plant, you're going to awaken biology. You're going to have more earthworms and more microbes. That's gonna help you. So what are you trying to accomplish is one of the first questions you need to ask. So I wanted to take you through an example here of something that I took these series of pictures on my farm here in Pennsylvania in the United States. And by the way, I should have said earlier, I'm about 3.5 hours southwest of New York City and 2.5 hours north of Washington, D.C. So that'll give you an idea of where I farm. And so we have a nice growing season. In the wintertime, the temperature gets down to about -17 Celsius. So that might be cold for some of you, but for some of you it may not be. But so some of our cover crops do indeed winter kill. They're killed by the cold weather. So you have to translate some of the things I'm doing to the context of where you live, where your geography is, as far as, especially when talking about cover crops for winter kill or winter survivability. So I want to show you this beautiful picture here. I planted this in the fall, in the early fall, and you can see some radish and some oats and some hairy vetch. If you look closely in there, you'll see some other things like peas. And the plan here was to plant corn. So I'm going to plant corn. So I got a lot of legumes, but I have my radish in there to help with compaction alleviation, to collect any nutrients that might be left over from the previous crop and hold them. So here's how it looks in the fall. It's going to start getting cold and get into winter. And now this is how that exact same mix looks in late winter. So now the radishes are dead. They're totally killed. -7, I believe it is about when radishes will die. So the hairy vetch and everything is kind of down because of the cold weather, but it's just soon going to start to come to life, the things that have survived. So the ground is still covered, which is important. So you see, I don't want to see my soil very often. I don't want to see my soil. I want it to be covered year round. So that's why I wanted to show you this picture. And then when we come in springtime, it's about ready for planting. You can see we have our crimson clover starting to bloom. The hairy vetches come back to life. We have our oats and our triticale in there, and it looks beautiful again. It's growing. Again, we're going to plant corn into this. So I will go in and I will roll down the cover crop and I will plant corn, no-till plant corn. Now, one thing I wanted to tell you here, again, this is long-term no-till, 25 years of no-till, and a lot of cover crops used, is I'm trying to reduce my herbicides. So I'm going to show you this picture here now. The only herbicide this had here was some glyphosate to help terminate the cover crop, but no residual herbicide. And then I'll show you a picture here pretty soon of how the end result was. Now I'm just going to be quick to point out, I can't do this in all my fields yet. There's still some fields that have too many weeds there. We have to use a herbicide after the corn is up. I don't like to use residual type herbicides. I will come in with post-emergent type herbicides if I need to. Now, I will also say too, I'm not a large acreage farmer. I don't have a lot of hectares, so I can do some of this specific management here that maybe is easier for a small scale farmer. But by the time harvest comes, you can see here that I don't have hardly any weeds and no residual herbicides applied. Again, just to remind us, I did use some glyphosate to terminate the cover crop. So this is what's possible. That saves me money. Everyone wants to save money, right? Because that adds to profitability. So because we have that mixed species, that multiple species, weed control is certainly something that helps among many other things as well. So again, when we talk about these mixed species, you do need to understand how they interact with each other. And it is complex. And some people get afraid because they don't understand it. Well, it's like riding a bicycle. You can't learn to ride a bicycle by reading a book. You have to try. So I'm suggesting you try to use mixed species cover crops. See what works in your area. What are your neighbors doing that's working? When you go to a field day, what seems to be working? Because you never come to a moment in time where you get the exact right recipe. It's not the way it works with cover cropping. Those of us who have been doing this for a long time, and those of you who are watching here that have been doing it for a long time, you know that it's a journey. You keep learning. Every year you try something a little different to make it a little better. But you have to start. And so again, what are your objectives? What are you trying to do? And then you can start thinking about what mixes to put together. And then sometimes, for whatever reason, a certain species may not be available the coming year. You may have to get a similar species. You may have to change it. The other thing too is a lot of people say, well, I like this mixed species concept, but doesn't it cost more money per hectare? It doesn't have to. And what we have found is the cover crop math. Remember what I said, 1 + 1 = 3? The cover crop math works with seeding rates. So when you start adding 1, 2, 3, 4 or more species together, you can actually lower the overall seeding rate based on even the individual seeding rate. If you can follow me through there. So people ask, well, how do you come up with a seeding rate? Well, this is very practical information here. If you have a very aggressive type species, and I'll say in the fall, the tillage radish is aggressive. It grows fast. The big leaves grow fast. If you want to have a tiny crimson clover or a tiny seeded Persian clover, to survive, you have to reduce your radish seeding rate to low, very low, not many. So this is what you need to understand, these dynamics. And so I want you not to make too many mistakes the first time. So you have to just think this through. Better yet, as I said, ask your friends, your neighbors, what's working for them, or your seed dealers if they understand how all this works. But, excuse me, but the seeding rate can be lower than you think. Now, the cost of seeds sometimes go up and down from year to year. So you have to check, what is the price of the Persian clover this year? Maybe it changes. Maybe that price is high. You think, well, I'm going to switch and use hairy vetch instead. So that's an option. Again, that's management. So you have to be able to sometimes actually write it out and figure it out, what your costs are in this. Another concern that people have is, if I mix seeds together, will they separate? Where the seeds, the lighter seeds go to the top, and then by the time you're done planting the field, it'll have a different ratio. The answer is, the more species you have mixed, the less separation there will be. Obviously, if you have a pea, which is a large round seed, and a radish, which is a small round seed, that wouldn't work very good. But if you put some oats in there, or some wheat or triticale, that will help keep those two round seeds from separating. So these are just some simple little tricks you can use when you try to figure this out. But the seed separation is not a problem if you have the right seed mix together. So I wanted to show you a few pictures of my farm. Again, you can see the rolling hills there. This is hairy vetch and crimson clover. It's planting corn. So I'm able to reduce my nitrogen to half. I only need half the purchased nitrogen. Because I have a good cover crop there, my herbicide rate is dramatically reduced to 1/4. And in this field here, we got the same yield. Now, I grow some of my crops for my neighbor dairy farmers, the ones that have cows. And when we harvested this crop, we took it and sold it to him and put it right in his silo. He told me that the cows liked my silage better than they liked his silage. And I think it's because of the cover crops, because of the diversity, because of higher organic matter, because of all these things. I think I think we're growing healthier crops that may even have more nutrients in. I can't prove it, but it serves a good feeling when you sell something and they say that the animals did good on it. So I'm happy to hear all that. So as I said, I was in Argentina last November, and I really love this picture because I love being with farmers. I like being out in the field and what we can learn. This was a rather large field. As cover crops you can see, and I appreciated the fact there's even some the younger generation was there, and I remember that day we just had a lot of fun just to see what the research was in Argentina. But this was really dramatic, and it really impressed me. So there was the one research farm that we went to. They have an experiment here where they started using cover crops 5 years ago. And that is the section there on the right-hand side of the picture. The night before we came there, they had a lot of rain. And as you can see, where the cover crops had been planted, the water had infiltrated into the soil. But I really wish you could have been there that day, because what I saw in the soil was even more dramatic than this picture. So sometimes, you have to see these type of things to believe it, to understand it. And as you know, the water table in a lot of areas is a concern. And so you want to be able to get the water to drain away so your cash crops can grow, but you also want it to hold it there. So I will just tell you that I use this picture now in almost every one of my presentations wherever I go in the United States or Canada or around the world. So I really love this picture because of the dramatic difference that it showed there in using cover crops. So I also want to highlight too some of the farms I was on, and some of you probably know Sandro Raspo and Maria Teresa, which I know they're listening today, so hello. But this is on their farm, and I was really impressed with the research that they're doing, and I would recommend farmers and crop consultants, agronomists would do something like this. So I have the red arrows there are pointing to the poles that are in the field that outline his different research cover crop plots. They go from left to right. So they have these plots going out there, and then they'll plant their cash crop in there, and then they can observe which cover crops or which cover crop mixes do the best. And if I understood right, there's several years into this, and then it will take the yields and to see how well it yields. This is a great example of some on-farm research that will really help understand how you can best manage cover crops. And I will just say too that 1 year is not enough. You have to keep testing over years. Once you start to see something that's consistent for 3 years, then you know you have a management option that is very viable. So I really liked when I saw this. The other thing too is seeing some of the technology and some of the equipment and being able to seed cover crops, to seed mixed cover crops, to mix with fertilizer. All these things help to save money. So again, this is in Argentina when I was there at another farm that really showed the different types of cover crops that are out there and some of the technology and some of the machinery. So this is what we need to do. We need to try. We need to experiment because really we're just in kindergarten. We're just starting to learn all this. And sometimes farmers will see a benefit and it's not even backed up yet by science. So sometimes we see the benefit and then we think, well, how did that work? And I would say with cover crops, and particularly multi-species cover crops, farmers are seeing that there's a benefit there. But we're still trying to understand it. And we need to be able to understand it so we can better manage it. So I'm all for research. I'm all for the scientists, for the universities, for government people where they can help, as long as it's practical, that farmers can use the information. So just impressed to see all that, what I saw when I was there in Argentina. So now back to my farm here. A few other things in establishing a cover crop. Here I'm using a corn or corn soybean planter to be able to plant cover crops. So I'm using this machinery as a dual purpose. And that has worked very well. There's some companies out there that are making the correct vacuum type seed discs that can accommodate cover crops. There's some options out there now to do that. So you might want to use a planter like this. I know that some of these are available in South America as well. But I love this picture here. I love this video because there again, you see the old plant residues from the corn and the new fresh cover crops growing out of that. It's just a beautiful picture. But even more beautiful is a few weeks later, I have a green field again. And that's what we want. We want to have our fields green as much as possible, year round, as much as possible. And that does so much for the biology, and it gives us so much opportunity to be able to maximize the benefits. And those benefits are, over time, maybe not the first year, but over time, less fertilizer use and less pesticide use and a healthier food product. So where's the future going? What is in the future? Well, this is a very impressive high-tech planter from Canada. And I read about this planter, and it was very interesting to me because they said that you can plant 6 different crops at once. So as it goes through the field, you can adjust the seeding rates and you can adjust the mixes as you go through the fields. And this is just a close-up of the planting units, but possibly you could get your yield maps, those of you who have yield maps, and you could program to plant your cover crops. You could program your mixes even. And I've talked to this company and they said, yes, they've been experimenting with cover crops. Now, it's still a little difficult to know how to prepare for this and how to make a prescription for this, but this is where technology comes in, and this is where I think multiple species cover crops will eventually even become more popular when we can address different areas of the field instead of treating all the field the same. But even you don't have to have this technology to use multiple species. The nice thing about multiple species is some parts of the field, a certain cover crop in that mix may be better for that part of the field. And of course, another part may be other species that will benefit soil. So those are some of the things that are important to know. So as I be thinking about your questions here, because I'm wrapping up, but here's another important thing. And you don't think about this a lot as a farmer sometimes, but I'm saying you need a mentor, or you need someone that is doing similar things as you to learn from. So, who is someone that you can talk to ask questions? Do you think this will work? I tried this, it doesn't work. What did I do wrong? One of my mentors is Frederic Thomas from France. I've been to his place 4 times. He's been to my place. And we talk to each other probably once a month or more. And we think alike. But your mentor needs to be someone that is already doing what you want to accomplish. So that's important to do that. And here's another thing. Cover crops make good farmers better and bad farmers worse. Now, when I say this, I don't mean that you're a bad farmer because you made a mistake planting cover crops. But what I'm saying here is the good managers will make this work. And so you have to accept another level of management in order to be successful in this. One of the things we do here in Pennsylvania is I'm a part of our local group here, the Pennsylvania No-Till Alliance. We put these signs up along the fields so other farmers can see, and so the general public can also see what we're doing to protect the water and to protect the soils. And I think that's just important to be able to note that. Now, remember earlier on, I said I have a challenge for you. This is it. This is my 10% cover crop challenge. For some of you, I would like to challenge you to grow 10% more cover crops. Some of you, I would challenge you to grow multiple species or to do more multiple species, whatever is appropriate for your area. But wherever you're at, remember I said it's not so much where you're at on your cover crop journey, it's the direction you're headed. What is something that you could do better 10%? It's an easy goal, and I want to be realistic, but that's my challenge here for you today. I also want to finally mention that I just published a book that just came out, The Future-Proof Farm, Changing Mindsets in a Changing World. I have a copy here. And yes, indeed, Argentina and Uruguay actually made the book. It's in there. You can read about it. And so it really it's based on what I was just sharing here, but where I see the future of agriculture going, where I see the benefits and the opportunities by farming this way, by having a healthier soil and then growing more nutritious food. And yes, there's a page there where we had a nice conversation one afternoon at a farm, and I really love doing this type of thing. So I will say, if you're interested in the book, I know that it's expensive to ship individual copies. So if you want to kind of team together and I could send a bunch of them together, that would be good if you're interested. So you can get a hold of me for that. So muchas gracias. Thank you for your attention today. And I will turn it back to Tomas, ask any questions. And again, thanks a lot for this opportunity.
Thanks, Steve. That was really good. Congratulations. Was really clear all the concepts. So we have a few minutes until the end for some questions. There's a lot of questions coming up. So
Okay.
I will try to give you some of them. Are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay. So one of the question is, what do you think about aerial seeding, right?
Aerial seeding. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What do you think about that? And if you think there is, I mean, we know that maybe it's more expensive, but in terms of cover crop development, is better for some regions or not? What do you think about?
So aerial seeding, and we could also maybe include broadcast seeding with high clearance vehicles, like I showed that video, the Altima machine there from Argentina. It works, but it's not quite as consistent as a drill or a planter. But sometimes that's your only opportunity to get a cover crop planted, and it's also usually faster, and it's maybe sometimes for some people the only way they can do it. So I believe that aerial seeding is a viable way to get cover crops planted, but the challenge is to get them consistently to grow. So I think it's a benefit if the weather conditions are right. It's a little more risky. I think we need to say that, to be honest. And there's some people have made it work consistently, and other people's have failed at it. So I would encourage you to try it. Maybe there's some conditions that would be not as conducive to do that in, but make sure you get the right species. Usually our smaller seed is more consistent, but I would strongly suggest you talk to people in your area and learn from them. So it is good enough to try it, but if you can ever get the seeds planted, that's always better. But I will still say it's certainly worth the opportunity to try.
Good. Yeah, and it's aligned with what you said about treating the cover crops as cash crops, right?
You got it. You got it.
Yeah. So I think that concept is really clear.
Mm-hmm.
One of the other question is, what precautions will you have in cover crops? 400 per year, for example. What are your thoughts in that kind of regions with less water? What are your recommendations?
So in my area here, I get about 1,200 millimeters in a year. And for me in my area, it's the same. Average is the same. It never works out that way, but the average is the same. So the question always comes up, what about 600 millimeter rainfall area? How can I grow cover crops? How can I grow anything that's going to maybe take away moisture from my cash crop? And it's kind of a complex answer to it. And I will say this, it is more challenging. But I've been to Australia a couple times. And what the Australian farmers that are using cover crops have said, and by the way, some of them only have 450 mils of rain a year, and they're using cover crops. You may not have quite the same amount of opportunities, but when you do, when the soil is moist enough, you want to plant those cover crops to make the soil better, to make it more healthier. So what the Australians say is we need to build a bigger bucket. We need to build a bigger bucket to hold every drop of moisture that comes out of the sky, and to collect it and then to hold it there. So if you look at it from a 10-year time frame, and you be able to manage that, when you have that opportunity to plant a cover crop, you want to do it. So you can grow cover crops in drier areas, but it takes top level management to do that in that situation. So there's many farmers who are doing it. I will say this, that sometimes the farmers keep tilling the soil in those areas just so they can keep the weeds down, or they spray it with glyphosate? Well, if the soil has nothing growing in it, it gets very hot, and then the remaining moisture just goes. But if you have something growing there, it keeps it cooler. The microbes are happier. They will work for you. So nature, remember what I said? Always covers itself. Always covers itself, no matter where you're at in the world. So we have to think about how to do that. It's a little more tricky, but it can be done in a dry land area if you manage correctly.
Opportunity, right? In that areas, you have to be very precise.
Opportunistic.
So one question more open is what made you think like this way in the last 25 years? I mean, what was that change that you made in your cropping system, and why?
So the reason I started in 1982 was because we had soil erosion from our hills. We had ditches that were a half a meter deep. I couldn't harvest my corn because I couldn't get across with my equipment. I had to close the ditches. That's what first got me started. And then I started with no-till because of that. Then I started seeing the benefits of no-till. And then I asked the question, I was using cover crops a little bit. I thought, maybe if I no-till, I don't need the cover crops. So then one of the universities asked me to do a research to ask if cover crops are economically viable if we no-till for more than 10 years. And in the fourth year into that study, where we had no-till versus no-till and cover crops, the cover crop plot yielded 28 bushels, I guess around a ton or so more than that situation. So that I've never asked the question again if cover crops pay. I just try to manage them better now. So those are some of the key moments for me that happened in my farm. And now, of course, well, I had a seed company for a while, a cover crop seed company. I developed the tillage radish. So I did a lot of research on my farm, like over 1,000 plots of research. So I understand how this works on the farm. And for me, I have seen the benefits now, so it's no longer a question.
This is the thing that you mentioned, work with nature, right? And
That's right.
Yeah, work with nature, and one of the good thing was 1 + 1 is 3. Looking at your farm system, right? So that was really good. And one other of the question is how you see this maybe decreasing use of herbicides, for example, glyphosate. And do you think if we have a ban, for example, if the glyphosate is banned tomorrow in Pennsylvania, right? Do you think that you will be able to do this kind of cover crop system without the use of any, let's say, zero chemicals, right? Or what will be the issues that you will have to face?
Well, I would have to say, unfortunately, if glyphosate would be banned tomorrow, I would probably have to take a step backwards and use some tillage. And I'm just being very honest, because I've had this question when I'm in Europe. They ask this question because that's maybe the first place where it will get banned if it ever does. So now I will say too, glyphosate has been used too many times. So that's part of the reason we have problems now. Glyphosate is a good herbicide, but we as farmers have used it too much. And now we have to say, no, we got to use it a little bit less. So for me personally, I use glyphosate the least I need it, but I need it for my no-till and my cover crop situation. I believe that there's probably alternatives to glyphosate being invented, being tested right now. Because of all the negativity associated with glyphosate, there got to be some companies out there trying to figure something out with a better non-selective herbicide. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. But back to your question, you know, when people say that glyphosate should be banned, I will say, well, what's the alternative? The alternative for me is I would have to do some tillage. I would have to subject my fields to some erosion, and that's not good either. It's like driving a car. Cars pollute. They could kill you. But none of us want to go back to walking or riding horses, do we? So we take that risk, we take that chance until we find something better. And yes, they're making better cars. They're less polluting and they're safer. Same with herbicides. They're less polluting and safer, but we need to be able to manage them in a way that we don't rely on them quite as much as we did because we were using it too much. So that's my perspective on the use and the potential future ban or use of glyphosate.
That's good. That's good. And talking about the cars, I think that we also have to use the seatbelt in the agricultural production, right?
Good point. I like that.
Yeah, I think that's one of the key points. So other question that we have, you know, we have a lot of farmers from different parts from Argentina, right? So they are asking a lot of questions between different parts and different regions. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you know all the regions in Argentina, but for example, in South Cordoba region, mm-hmm. What multi-species covers you recommend? There are like semi-arid climate with very sandy soils, right? Okay. So what would you recommend for that part with sandy soils and semi-arid climate, let's say?
Well, what I found, first of all, I will say this, it's a little difficult for me to give specific recommendations until I have a 5-minute chat with somebody. But to your point, it's really interesting about cover crops. It's more about understanding the principles of how cover crops work than the exact right species. Everybody wants a prescription. Here, this is exactly what you should plant. And I could come up with some ideas on what would be some good ones. But my answer to your question is, well, what is working in your area? What is working in southern Argentina where it's colder? You know, I don't know enough information to give specific advice. So talk to those who are doing research. Talk to other farmers. Talk to seed dealers that are selling the seeds if they know what's working in their area. And keep listening. I mean, I talked about hairy vetch a lot. That would probably be a good one. Probably could find a place for a tillage radish. And depending how south it is, some of the legumes might not survive the winter. Triticale or cereal rye would be a good one as well. So the peas are good. There's 5 or 6 cover crops that are popular almost everywhere. So you start with that. And don't get too concerned about all these, odd species or species you never heard of. That's for later on in your journey when you get bored, I guess you would say, or you want to just take it up another, notch or two. So it's more about the principles. Sandy soil, is probably not so much concerned about erosion, I would assume. So, you might want to build organic matter. So can I use more of a grass in my mixes? More of the triticale or cereal rye? When I was in Argentina, I saw some very interesting genetics, I'll say. I wish I could have brought some of the seed back with me, but the security people don't like that. But anyway, so sandy soil would be, try to use grasses to help build organic matter. So I don't know. I hope that was a little helpful there, but I don't have specifics.
That's good. As I told you, we have a lot of farmers from different parts, so they are asking a lot of questions. We have only a few minutes left, so I will try to give you some more questions. Have you tried grain crop association? Interseeding different crops, and what was your result? I think that the question is more aimed to cash crops, right? But we know cover crop is a cash crop, but typical cash crop, right?
So I'm not sure if I understand your question totally. Are you saying like when you grow it like interseeding into a like corn, for instance, when the corn is this high.
Yeah, that's it.
We call that interseeding, and I know that Sandro and Maria Teresa did that at their farm, and I believe it seemed like it was somewhat successful. I've done a lot of research on that, and it doesn't work every time. But what we have found is, in my context, it's the further north. For you, the further south you go, the better it works. So the more colder areas that have a shorter season, they don't have time to grow cover crops, where they'll go in and put they'll use a machine to go through the fields and put the cover crop seed and just broadcast it out when the corn is just very, very short. We found in the growth stages of corn, V3 to V4 is an ideal time. Typically, people get a little bit too late. You have to think about your herbicide program when you do that, because if you have a residual herbicide, it may hinder the cover crop from growing. So here we have, like my own Penn State University did a lot of research on that with different types of herbicides. And it's not always consistent because of rainfall, because of organic matter, but they found some herbicides that are relatively short residual, the cover crops are able to grow. And then as the corn matures and starts dying down, then the cover crop starts growing. So by the time you harvest your corn, it's nice and green under there. If it works, that's ideal. And it's not going to work every time. I'll just say that. But you need to learn how to do it and see how it works in your area. For us, it's the more colder regions is where it works better.
Good. I have two more questions because we are running out of time. But that was great, your talk, and I enjoyed really. And I will try to read your book to have more insights about that. So, one of the questions is: are you measuring your carbon impact with some tool or something at your farm? Are you doing that kind of measure that you can say, okay, I improve my carbon sequestration in, I don't know, any terms? What are you dealing with that, or?
So I'm just starting to. I mean, obviously, organic matter is a kind of an indicator of carbon. It's a very close indicator. What I am trying to do, and there's not many people out there that are doing this, and I'm struggling to find the right people to help me to do it. So I have initiated some conversations. I want to know, is my farm carbon neutral, or is it close to carbon neutral? How close is it? Because I would love to be carbon neutral. Whereas, I'm getting more carbon than I'm using when you account for the use of fuel and even pesticides and all that. If you take everything I'm doing, I think I might be carbon neutral, but I don't know, because I don't know the science behind it all. I know they're developing some software where you can, input, all your practices and everything you do. But so that's something I'm working on. To answer your question, I'm working on it.
Okay, that's good. One other question is, how do you see the resistance of weeds for different cover crops? For example, radish, right? There's a lot, but due to appearance of resistance from some brassicasias that we say.
Right. So we have different weeds that are resistant to herbicides here. Started about 20 years ago. And we've been able to manage around that with using cover crops is very helpful. And so even when I was in Argentina, I saw some plots where they didn't plant cover crops and where the weeds grew up, and the glyphosate did not kill them, but where the cover crops was, there was hardly any weeds there. I've seen the same thing here. For us, we have, Palmer amaranth is a big one, mare's tail or horseweed, depending what you want to call it. So it has not been a serious problem in my farm. There are some farms where they just plant two crops, corn and soya. They're having the most problem. And I'm telling you, that's why diversity is important. Because when we change our cash crops, when we can put a small grain in there, like a wheat or a barley or something like that, if you can, that's going to be helpful. So again, we brought some of these problems on because we're violating the principles of nature. You got to have diversity. And we've relied too much on some of the inputs. Again, the inputs are just tools. And if you use them too much, nature has a way of working around that. So, so my advice is to try to get more cash crops, try to grow more cover crops, and that's going to give you a better ability to limit, not eliminate, but to limit the effects of potential herbicide-resistant weeds.
That's good, Steve. There's a lot of congratulations of your words. So, and honestly, there's a lot of questions. I mean,
Yeah, sure.
we have to stay, I don't know, 2 more hours to talk about this. It's really, really, really good. I don't know if you, one of the last questions, are you experimenting with different crops that we are not used to here in this region that we may need to include? Because you talk a lot about hairy veg, a lot about, I don't know, clovers or radish, but there's something you are trying. I don't know. That's an open question, huh?
I didn't quite hear everything because you cut out, but I think you're saying about some other interesting cover crops. So some
they were asking something. For example, in the United States, in some regions they are using hemp, right?
Oh, hemp.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I started growing hemp last year. This is my second year of growing hemp. It's for the CBD, so it's a cash crop for me. But I don't want to be confused here. There's also sun hemp, Fertilaria juncea, which is, I think, pretty popular in your area, where you can use that as a cover crop because it's a legume. But as far as using hemp or industrial hemp for the fiber or for the seed or for the CBD oil, that is becoming more popular. But the price has really gone down for the way it was last year. It was high. This year, very low. So everybody's like, whoa, wait a minute here. I'm not sure what's happening. So, but I'm growing hemp. Matter of fact, I can just look out here and I can see one of my fields right now that's growing. Because remember, it's middle of summer for me. So yeah, I'm continuing to develop that. I'm making my own brand and so forth. So yeah, there's new crops out there. One of the newer ones for around this area is canola or oilseed rape. It's a few more farmers are growing that now. I tried it for 3 years. It's okay. I like it more as a cover crop, actually. So, you just got to keep talking. I know that markets are a very important variable in all this. So you got to grow something that's going to, give you a return on your investment.
That's good, Steve. So I think that your concept is to give more to the soil that we take off from them, right? It's like it's very interesting, and I appreciate your time to be in this session and this meeting, in this Congress.
Yep.
As I told you, there's a lot of questions. I don't know. We have to read your book and search through the web and try to answer all that questions, right? But again, I appreciate your help. We take a lot of time, so we are coming to the end, and I leave the microphone open to you if you have any final conclusions or final words, and just with that we are finalizing.
Well, yeah, and I appreciate, again, we're learning together. I don't have all the answers, but that's what I enjoy in my travels. I enjoy being on my farm, first of all, but I enjoy traveling because I want to learn as well. And so my advice to farmers is to stay curious and keep learning. And that's what excites me. Farming is never boring. The future is going to be regenerative agriculture. And I'm excited about the future. Not going to be easy, but that's the direction that I think everything is going. So yeah, I would just encourage everyone to keep learning and going to field days, educate yourself, keep trying. but don't try too many new things. You know, you got to be careful there because sometimes you don't want to make a too big of a mistake. So learning together is very, very important. So again, muchas gracias. Thank you for having me today. I really appreciate it.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Thanks all for joining this session. And again, thanks, and really was a really good moment to share with you.
Good. Hey, thank you. Yep.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yep. Bye.